Hello everybody, and here again, Friday, second to last day probably of this sort of vlogging. It's not really a challenge. I've heard someone, I've called it a challenge. I'm not sure if it is or not, but I'm not sure how long to carry this on. I may well carry it on after tomorrow anyway. But I don't really. One of the things I've tried to avoid actually is talking about vlogging itself, because I can see that some people could find that a bit boring. What's the point of doing a vlog a day if all you ever talk about is vlogging? Like Gary said in his most recent video, I prefer to sort of talk about topics or think about something and then sort of take it to the side. I thought I'd talk today about something that happened at work and sort of around that type of thing. In my line of work, I have to sort of do rules exams and that with people. But because of that, and I assess people, etc. as well, because of that, I'm supposed to know what the rules are as well, and I have to be assessed. And I've had one of those assessments today, and it's one of those sort of things I've said before about sort of testing yourself and how sometimes strength through adversity type thing. I'm not saying this is any sort of adversity having like a rules exam, but if you test yourself, go through something, you can usually come out the other side, and it can become a good experience. It might not be a good experience at first, and I've always had that sort of bring it on mentality, which I've spoken about before. Didn't necessarily think about that today, but I didn't really prepare for this in any particular way. I wasn't really know what to expect because the sort of system has changed, should we say. But sitting there today with the guy, and he's got his sort of laptop in front of him, he's got all these sort of nearly 300 odd questions and sort of variations, etc. Stuff that I should know or be pretty well versed on, because if I'm examining people myself and asking them these questions around the sort of rules about the job, and believe me, there are a lot, and that's only part of it. You should know them yourself, and that's the whole idea of it. Now, in the past, somebody, it's like you get to know the person who was doing this sort of exam, if you want to call it that. It's an assessment really rather than an exam, I'd like to think of. You know them pretty well, so there's always that sort of temptation to maybe not do it as well as you might do if you had like somebody else, if you were like assessing somebody who wasn't on the same level as you. Do you know, if you know what I mean, work-wise? I don't mean that in any way personality or derogatory in any way whatsoever, but if they were on a lower level, you would probably feel better about sort of asking them the questions, etc. But when they're on the sort of same level as you, there's always that sort of, not trepidation, but there's always that sort of, now how do I take this? Do I do this really seriously, or do I sort of hang back? Am I going to be a bit more, flexible, should we say, about the answers that are giving, and do I prompt people? Or, you know what I'm getting at. But actually, me and the guy afterwards just discussed it, because he did it properly. He went through all the questions, etc. And in a way, it was good, because a lot of it I wasn't expecting. There were certain things I was expecting, because I know how the process works, obviously, but you never quite know how the questions are. We've had these sort of questions in the past, and then this is the questions that we would give to other members of staff, but this has been sort of done differently, and they come out worded differently, and there were some quite surprising ones that I wasn't expecting in it. But the experience itself, I did all right. And that's the point. I was very pleased with how I came out the other end of that. The guy who did it said, yeah, it was quite good, and I said, we had this discussion, and I sort of felt good about that. No one likes to go into an exam, no one likes to be assessed. I can't think of anybody who enjoys those situations, but I suppose it depends on how that situation is handled. As I said, how you relate to the other person. If the other person can give you a sort of a relaxed atmosphere and make you feel at ease, whether hopefully, if I'm assessing someone, I prefer to try and do that myself, and if someone's assessing me, it's good if you can have that sort of relaxed sort of atmosphere, rather than that sort of firing questions and you're sort of going there sort of oh dear, really nervous, etc., which doesn't do anybody any good really. It's unavoidable at times, but we all have that sort of slight anxiety about tests, exams, whatever it might be in any walk of life. But if you do come out of it the other end and it is done properly and you do well at it, it feels good. Even if you don't do well at it, you can learn from those experiences. You can think, well, yeah, that wasn't very good, but I can move on. If you're not examined properly, and this is the point that we were talking about afterwards, if you're not examined properly, you never actually find out about yourself, especially if it's to do with work or something that's important to you. You might think you have that particular knowledge, but unless you have some sort of an assessment or some way of actually gauging whether you really do know that knowledge, you will never know. And sometimes the only way you can do that is by having a proper assessment and it's done properly. If you sort of muddle through life and you think you know about certain things and you don't, I can think of examples of people who I know who think they know about certain subjects. And once again, I'm not trying to be nasty about this, but they think they know about certain subjects. And then when you talk to them, you think you haven't got a clue what you're talking about. But because they think they know, and no one's ever corrected them. I can't say I've ever really corrected them myself because I don't like to be nasty about it. They will never find out. And maybe that's a fault of mine. I should have said something to them. I should have said, but I'm sorry, mate. That isn't quite right. I have done that to an extent, but you never want to hurt people's feelings, do you? But sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. We've probably all heard that expression. It's a bit, I talked about oxymorons yesterday. I suppose being cruel to be kind could be in that sort of way as well. So there you go. That was my experience today. Sort of an assessment that was slightly different to what I imagined, but I came out of it the other side, and actually I felt pretty good about it all the time. You're never looking forward to these things, but as I said, if you come out of it the other side, and you were tested, and I was tested, and that is good, as I said, because it makes you feel good. However you come out of it, you can, especially if you get, even if you don't do so well, if you get that sort of positive feedback and you can move on from it, learn where you made your errors maybe, and you can learn from any experience, whether it be good or bad, and you can move forward and use those experiences for the future and move on. I have now got sort of more confidence possibly. I always, without sort of sounding big-headed, always thought I was doing a pretty good job. But as I said, you're never quite sure until you are tested, maybe, and that's what's so good about doing that properly. And as I said, you can probably equate this to so many different things. I now know that I do know what I'm talking about in that sphere anyway. For that sort of side of my life at work, I do know what I'm talking about. Whether I'm talking rubbish the rest of the time, that's a different matter altogether. Maybe for other people to say. I have had things when I've talked about subjects in vlogs before, and people have sort of pointed out, sorry Andy, what you said there isn't quite right. That's completely fine. I don't have a problem with that. And if I ever say anything in a vlog and I'm not right, or you don't think I'm right, please challenge me. I don't know everything. I'd maybe do a little bit of research about some of these things. It's something that I've read. I might not have read the right thing myself. We all see different articles and maybe different sort of versions of events. So please pull me up, because I'd like to know what I'm supposed to know. I'd like to think that what I do say is truthful. I am saying the right things, and sometimes you do need that sort of feedback. You sometimes need to get something wrong for someone to tell you, no, sorry mate, that's not quite right. This is the right answer, or this is the way that you should be doing that. And you can learn from it, and as I said, you can move on and become a better person. So anyone else has assessments, I'm not going to go into the details of what I do, etc., because I don't do that sort of thing. But anyone else has assessment, I'd love to know what you think. How do you feel about it? Are you one of these people like my wife who absolutely hates any type of assessment, hates to be sort of watched doing anything where she works? I have to have that as well. I'm not particularly comfortable about it, but why aren't you comfortable? If you're confident in what you're doing, if you think you know what you're doing, and what you're doing is right, why should you not feel particularly comfortable? Yes, there's always that sort of edge, as I said, exams or something. Overconfidence is a bad thing as well. There's that sort of thin line between confidence and overconfidence, and maybe that's something I should talk about in another video, because I've had that at work recently in another experience. But I'm going to leave it there, because once again, I start talking, I'm off. It's 8.5 minutes or whatever, and I'm amazed myself with some of these videos actually, that I've started off talking. This one, absolutely, well, they've all been sort of no preparation, and I start talking and I'm off, and I've surprised myself, even if that's possible, and I've probably surprised a few of you out there. You've probably not been given up watching by now, because they're all getting towards 10 or so minutes. And I look at some of the other people's vlogs that are doing this Vlog a Day challenge, or vlog every day forever, I don't know about that, VEDFI I think they call it, and most of their videos are sort of getting shorter. They're the 5 minutes, the 2 minutes now. Even I think I saw one that was 10 seconds. It's only maybe Beth who's carrying on doing her normal 7, 8, 9, 10 minute vlogs, and that's great. So more power to you, Beth, for that. Anyway, I'm going to do another one tomorrow, and then, as I said, I shall see how it goes, see how I feel about making these subjects. I think I may well change, but I'm thinking about actually talking about vlogging tomorrow and my experience about the week and how I felt about that. As I said, I don't really want to keep talking about vlogging, but it's a reflection on how I felt about this vlog. That may well change by then. Who knows what might turn up in the future. Anyway, thanks for your time. I shall see you tomorrow. Goodbye.